Hey there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to talk about books that I've paused again. Well, last year in February I made a video about all of the books that I've paused because I mentioned how I'm not a big fan of DNFing. I don't DNF books very often, and there's a whole discussion about why and all of that in my DNF tag that I answered, so I'll leave a link to that down below if you're curious. But I did also mention about books that I've paused, which are ones that some people would call it a temporary DNF, but I just like to call it pausing a book, where I started and I read however far I do and I just think, not now, and I come back to it later, whether that later be tomorrow, the next month, next year, or in some cases, several years. So in that video I shared 10 books that I paused, and I wanted to revisit those books and see if I finished them or not, and then I would give you an additional 10 of like new books that I've paused in this video. So first of all, going through the list of books that I paused, Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne Brown, and I actually did finish that one. I did a vlog where I read books by black authors that very same month and finished A Song of Wraiths and Ruin, and I paused it because it was a fantasy book that I wasn't really getting into, I wasn't really vibing with, but I'm so glad that I paused it and did not DNF it because I really liked the ending. I thought the ending went places that other books don't necessarily dare to go, and the way it ended made me so excited for the sequel, so I'm very glad that I finished that book that I paused. I also in that video mentioned Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, which is a very popular book, and it follows all of these different black women and tells you a bit about their life. It's kind of written in verse, and I paused it because I just wasn't feeling it, and actually that feeling maintained all the way through me finishing it. I just thought it was an okay book. It's not necessarily one for me. I didn't find it as groundbreaking and amazing as other people did. I can understand why it's monumental in the way that it shows these black women's lives, but it wasn't surprising in the way that it was linked, like how their stories were linked or connected. I didn't find that especially mind-blowing. I was just like, okay, they're linked. And the chapter at the end where things came together, I predicted that from way back, so it wasn't an amazing book. It didn't really vibe or connect with me, and maybe it's one that I actually shouldn't have finished and just given away, but I'm still glad that I read it. So yeah, I'm glad that I read it, I'm glad that I finished it, but it still just didn't really quite strike. We have Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, and I finished that one as well, and I'm so glad that I paused it when I did. I paused it because I went in with certain expectations and they weren't what the book was really about. I thought it was going to be a more mature fantasy book, but it's the younger end of young adult, it feels like, and I just expected something completely different from Sorcery of Thorns after having loved An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. But when I came back to it later and revisited it after, I think I read the first few chapters and then just paused it, and I was like, this is not what I expect, so I'm going to come back to it when I'm in the mood for what it truly is, and that worked so well. I had such a blast with that fantasy book. I think it's so much fun. I really like the characters. There's this demon cat who is amazing, was definitely my favourite, and it was just really good action, really enjoyable. I'm so glad I went back to it and picked it up when I was in the mood. That's exactly why I pause books, for this kind of book. Then we have NW by Zadie Smith, and this was actually a book that I DNF'd. That's really rare, but I did it. I was just like, this is not it. I went back and I did pick it up and I read a few more chapters, and I thought, I'm still not enjoying this despite having paused, and I'm not going to force myself through this. I DNF'd it, I unhauled it, and it's gone. And then another one that I mentioned in that video is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, and I DNF'd it and I unhauled it. So I actually DNF'd 2 books. I actually feel very proud of myself for DNFing those 2 books. Usually one of the reasons why I don't DNF is that when I think about DNFing, it actually makes me sad. I don't enjoy not finishing books. It just makes me feel unhappy and it makes me feel unsatisfied. But when I got to those 2 books and I thought about DNFing them, it didn't make me feel sad, it actually made me feel happy, which is how you're supposed to feel when you DNF. No more Gillian Flynn in my life, and unfortunately that was the second time I was trying Zadie Smith, so no more Zadie Smith either. I also mentioned 4 other books in that video. I mentioned 4 other books. These are them. I did not finish them or DNF them. They're still paused. So in me mentioning the 10 books that I am having on pause, I'm going to mention these ones again. Yay! Yay! I really hope that I can read them this time around before the next pause video. I don't think there's going to be a consequence for me not finishing them before the next pause video, but I just thought I would talk about them. We've got Sabriel by Garth Nix. I read to almost halfway before I paused it. This is a fantasy book and I just find it really boring. I just find it incredibly boring. I'm not a big fan of traveling in fantasy books, and even then, traveling with someone can sometimes be boring. She's traveling on her own with a talking cat, you know? It's boring, but I'm hoping to finish it because this is a much beloved fantasy series. I'm in the mood for fantasy right now, and it was actually reading very quickly and very easily. I'm just going to try this first one, and if it doesn't pick up by the end, I'll just say I'm not going to continue the series anymore, but I do want to keep giving this one a shot and continue. We've got Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin, which I've already mentioned in the oldest books on my TBR video, so I'm not going to talk about it extensively here either. It's the book I've had on pause for the longest, and it's about time that I did something about that. It's going to be read this year though. This one is definitely going to be finished by the next video. But Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare. I think I've missed my boat with Shadowhunters, and Shadowhunters aren't going to be my thing anymore, but I do want to finish this one off before deciding hard and fast that I'm done with the Shadowhunters series. And I've read exactly halfway. I remember that I've read to exactly halfway with this book, but I've had it on pause for several years now because I started it first year of uni. It's been like 6 years. The fact that Clash of Kings has been on pause for longer than 6 years, it just goes to show how long some things can end up on pause. And in that video I also mentioned Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo, which I've had on pause for a very long time as well. I can't believe it's been over a year that I haven't read this book. I got quite far. Okay, no I didn't. I read 6 chapters and then I decided to put it on pause because I didn't care about anybody's perspective except for Jesper's, which is not how you're supposed to read these books. So I decided to put it on pause for what I can, readjust my expectation to care about the other characters more, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think I just have to read it because the truth of the matter is I don't like Kaz. I don't like him at all, and I'm not as big of a fan of some of the other characters. Like, I don't like Matthias, I don't like Kaz, I think Inez is fine, love Nina, love Wylan, love Jesper, and I'm so happy that a certain someone gets their own point of view in this book. I just don't care about reading about the characters that I don't like as much as my favourites. But that's just how it goes. I should just really read this one. It's gonna happen this year. This one's also gonna happen this year. I say that about a lot of books, but you know, this is the real deal. Here's some new books that I've paused. The first one being The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. So as I've mentioned previously, I don't pause a book because it's a bad book. I think Crooked Kingdom's going to be a great book. I think Clash of Kings is going to be a great book, but sometimes I just pause them because my expectations are different, or I'm not in the mood, or I get distracted. And that's what happened with The Vanishing Half. I started this book for work's book club. Book clubs don't work for me because I can't do TBRs, so having to read this for a deadline, it just wasn't working. And I read the first few chapters and I was having a blast. I was really loving it. The writing gripped me immediately. I love Passing by Nella Larson, which is what this book is inspired by, and I was seeing all of those connections and I was so intrigued by the characters. I was really enjoying it, but then book club happened and I hadn't finished it, so I moved on to reading things that I was in the mood for rather than what I was reading for a required book club. So I'm just gonna get back to this one when I'm in the mood for it, and I think I'm gonna love it. I can really see me racing through this one and just having a blast. Lair of Dreams by Libba Bray, and this was a buddy read. We buddy read the first one and we both really enjoyed it, and then we were buddy reading this one and I got a third of the way through and then I was just like, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it right now, and I haven't been in the mood to pick it up since. And it wasn't that I was disliking it. It wasn't that I was having a bad time. I just switch off. My mood changed, and I just couldn't deal with this book anymore. But I hope to be able to pick it up soon. This is the second book in a historical fiction horror kind of series, and it's solid. It's a solid sequel to what was an enjoyable first book. I just need to be back in the mood for that genre. We have The Travelling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa, and again, this is one that I started and I was enjoying it. I was reading it for Draconathon, which is a readathon, but then the readathon ended and I hadn't finished this book for that prompt, so I just stopped reading it and put it on pause, but I was really enjoying what I was reading. I realised I like cats in books, which is so weird because for so long I didn't like animals in books, but lately there's been some very good cat books, and you know, like the demon cat in Sorcery of Thorns. That was a great cat. Anyway, so I was reading this one, and in this one it's like from the perspective of the cat, and the cat is really sassy, but we're learning stuff about people around the cat as well, and it's really good. It was off to a really solid start, so I'm looking forward to finishing this one. This was actually a gift from someone in my church, so it's not something I would have picked up myself, but I'm so glad that they gifted it to me because I actually think I'm gonna have such a good time with this book. The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafron. And this is a very well-known classic, and I was buddy reading this one with Mariana. We just both were not feeling it, so it was actually a mutual buddy read. I think for her it was a DNF, for me a pause, and we read The Love Hypothesis together and loved it. So that buddy read was a success in the end, but I decided to put this one on pause. She got to halfway, I got to just shy of halfway, and it felt like nothing happened. The storyline was going nowhere. The writing was kind of beautiful, but there were so many problems. The main character's unlikable. I struggle with unlikable characters, and so much of this book is the main character just being told stories rather than them going and figuring things out for themselves, or something they do, giving them the information that they need. The information is just told to them by different characters, and I think I mentioned that in my review of The Obelisk Gate. I don't like when it just feels so handover in terms of information. It just feels like exposition. It just feels like the author wants us to know stuff and they're just telling it to us. So I felt like this was really boring, was going nowhere, but I still want to finish it. I don't think I'll continue with this series at all. I think it's safe to say that now, but I do think I want to get the audiobook of this one and just listen to it, because I'm curious when it comes to popular books like this. I want to know what it is about that book that fascinates people so much, so I usually see them through to the end, and listening to the audiobook is a way for me to easily do that without investing too much of my own time into it. Another one I paused is The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans. This is a short story collection I've seen quite a few booktubers enjoy, but I read the first two short stories and I just wasn't having as good of a time as they seem to be having, and I think partially I picked this up at the wrong time. I just finished reading Objects of Desire by Clare Sestonovich, which was one of my favourite, it was my favourite short story collection I read in 2021, and I just thought I need more short story collections like this, and decided to pick up this one when what I really wanted was more short stories by Clare Sestonovich, which can't happen because she hasn't published anything else yet. So I wasn't being fair to this book, because I wanted more of an author and decided that I would just project those wants onto this book. So once I figured that out, I decided to pause it and come back to it later, because I do want to give it a fair shot. I do want to read and enjoy Danielle Evans short stories for what they are, rather than a projection of my feelings from another short story collection, which is why this is on pause, and I will give it another go. And then last but not least, we have Arctic Zoo by Robert Muchamore. So this is a proof that I got at an event, and I met Robert Muchamore, which was quite exciting to me because I'd read his books when I was a child, and then because of blogging and like growing up and blogging, I was able to meet like an author that I loved as a child. I thought that was really, really nice, and he followed me on Twitter and I felt very special. And then I picked this one up immediately after I got home, and then I don't know what happened. It didn't continue. Oh, my bookmark in this was from when I did pole at uni. Oh, I still had 4 lessons left. Anyway, I just picked this one up and just didn't get back to it, and it wasn't even off to a bad start. It was all interesting and I'm so curious about the content. I didn't return. So that's another one I have on pause that I should really read, because it's a proof and it came out ages ago now. Anyway, so there you have it. Those are 10 books that I put on pause. I just want to know in the comment section down below, do you sometimes put books on pause? Which books have you put on pause? And yeah, please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more. Don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, Excelsior! Sabriel. No comment.